Hi, everyone. I'm Greg Brown, and I am your closing keynote today. I hope you've had a great time at the virtual event today and gotten to listen to some good talks. I got to sit in on two of them, which I was really, really happy about. So, welcome to Navigating the Future of Work. And we're going to look at three steps to not only help you navigate the future of work, but to help you engage others in your ideas so that they can actually take action. So it doesn't matter where you sit in the IT professional world. I'm sure that if you're like me, who's managed lots of multi-million dollar IT projects, just to sort of drop a little bit of my history here, that we have to always engage others in our ideas so that they can take action on things sometimes they don't really want to take action on. And that's what we're going to look at today. So we're going to get three steps to help you do that. Now, a couple of pieces for you to know. There is a question uh, box in the right hand side of your screen. You can ask me questions there, and I will try to answer them as best as I can throughout our session today. There's also some resources for you there that you can download for after the session, and I'll make sure to point those out to you again. And it summarizes a lot of the key points that we'll be talking about today. So let me just take you back to March 2020 to set the context of where we're going. So you may remember in March 2020, like a snap of our fingers, the global health crisis came around the world. One minute we were at our desks working away in our offices. The next we were juggling kids, cats, dogs, food, work, everything from our kitchen table. Or some of you, if you were lucky enough to have offices at home, you might have been juggling it at your office at home. Now, juggling all that stuff wasn't easy back then because we also had all this fear around going on around us. And I don't know if you remember this, but the question that was at the top of people's minds was, do we have enough toilet paper? Do you remember going into stores and the shelves were cleared of paper products? It all seems sort of silly now, doesn't it? Now that we're in the fall of 2022. Yet it's very natural during unprecedented change to ask questions that in hindsight might not seem that important. So that's your first tip today, is that when you're dealing with change at work, you may have questions you think are silly. People may have questions they think are silly. In hindsight, they might seem silly, but at that moment, they might seem really important. So remember that piece with everything that we went through. Now, one of the good things about this pandemic is this: crises are where people find their greatness. Why? Because they push us in ways we haven't been pushed. And every single one of you and every single one of your organizations, including Login VSI, has found that they are more change ready than they think. Each one of you is more change ready than you think. Because if I'd said to you back in, let's say, February 2020, hey, we're going to make everyone virtual in your office that can go virtual, all of you would have been like, whoa, that's going to take us about a year to plan. All your executives would have said the same thing. It's going to take us about a year to plan it out. We got to figure all the issues out. There's regulatory, legislative, security requirements. We got to deal with like VPNs and what are people bandwidth issues at home? And what about their laptops? What are security on this? We have all of this stuff we're going to have to do. We have to take a year to plan it out. And then we're going to have to take a year to implement it because we have to do a rolling wave implementation and we got to pilot test this and see how it goes and all this sort of stuff. So it probably would have taken 2 years by the time you actually got things going. And yet what I can tell you is that every single one of you and your organizations that could went virtual like this, often within a week and a half to 3 weeks. And I've spoken all around the world for the last 3 years, both virtually and in person recently. And I can tell you it's the same everywhere. We broke through our own self-imposed limitations of what we can and cannot do. And that's a key piece about being future ready, is using that perspective to our advantage and to remind ourselves that, you know what, if we can do this, we can almost do just about anything. And as you all know, change has ramped up like crazy after the pandemic. And so while some people think we're coming out of it, some people think we're in it, it doesn't matter. We're sort of all moving through it still, and change has really ramped up. So we're going to do a poll to start us off. And so I'll get Gary to pop up the poll. And the question is this: what do you think is the most frequently cited factor in the research that says that you can be future ready and navigate work successfully? So let's see the poll. Let's get that up and see what happens with that. So, Gary, do you want to pop that up? There we go. Where is our trusty little poll? Let's see what's going on here. Gary, you able to pop that poll up? And we're to give you about a minute to fill it out. And I'm trying to see it here. There we go. Perfect. So let's see what the results look like. We're going to give it about a minute to go. Oh, look, we're starting to see the results come in. And if you look at the poll at the side, we're seeing good communication. We're seeing resilience. Oh, adaptability's in there. Look at it. Let's see what else we can see in the polls. Got adaptability, resilience. Oh, some people are saying a robust strategy. Let's see what else we've got going on. So being clear on my goals has got nothing so far. So, oh, adaptability's kicking up. There we go. So there's a comment in there. The poll ends up at the bottom if they are full screen, so it won't show. So have a look at your poll. It should be off to the side, just so y'all know. So let's have a look at the numbers there. So we've got 18% say good communication. Nobody's saying being clear on my goals. A robust strategies at 9%, adaptabilities at 45%. And we've got resilience at 25. And guess what the research says? It says adaptability. So great one on that. And to me, under adaptability, resilience falls in there. A robust strategy can fall in there. Some people wrote, being clear on my goals. I think that can fall in there as well. And of course, good communication can, but adaptability is the number one. And this is what we mean by adaptability: our ability to have a ready access to a range of behaviors and that empower us to shift, experiment, and innovate as things change. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at the 3 steps to shift, to experiment, and to innovate, because change and navigating the future is all about innovation and what that is. And of course, what this pandemic has shown is that it's really fallen on the heads of IT professionals to deal with that digitized workspace. And what we're going to see is more and more of that as we navigate that future of work. There's going to be more and more of that digitized workspace happening. So let's start off with we're going to look at 3x3 thinking, and I'm just going to give you a real highlight of this before we go into depth. So we're going to look at the 3 steps that are on the left, and I'm going to leave it up to you to apply it at the individual level, at the team, or at the organization level. So individual level will be to yourself, and the team might be the folks that you have to influence and engage. Because of course, the challenge is most of us who have been in IT we have no authority often, and yet we have a lot of responsibility, and we have to influence things to get things done when we have no authority. So that can sometimes be difficult. So that's all going to be about how do we engage others in our ideas to take action. And of course, we can look at it at the organizational level. I'll let you all do that. So one of my favorite quotes is from this woman named Bianca Andreescu. She's a Romanian Canadian, and she says this. She's one of the top-rated tennis players in the world, and she says this: everyone here knows how to play tennis. What separates the best from the rest is mindset. So what is mindset? Mindset is a collection of neurons in your prefrontal cortex. And what your prefrontal cortex does is this: it tells you what to pay attention to and to do decision making throughout the day. And if we don't do it properly to our mindset, if we don't program it correctly, we can miss stuff. So the big other principle of our mind says we're going to look at these sort of principles of this. So think about when you've had times in your life where your work life, when sometimes you get your brain working against you, and sometimes our brain works against us without us even knowing it. So we're going to talk about how to use frequency and selection bias to your advantage, and about how to engage your reticular activating system to make it going. Now, your reticular activating system is just up here at the top of your spine. You can probably see mine because I have no hair. And what that does is it's actually your attention filter. It actually tells you what to pay attention to. Um, it's like if you've worked in a cafe on your laptop and you're so focused on your work, you push out the din of the cafe, the noise, you don't notice it. Yet when someone calls your name, you immediately snap to attention. That's your reticular activating system working. So let's talk about frequency bias and selection bias and how this can help you navigate the future of work in your role as an IT professional. So, have any of you ever bought a new car and you're driving around in your new car and all of a sudden you go, I don't know what would be a good new car. Let's say a Honda Civic. So I have friends that have a Honda Civic. So you're driving around. I'm not saying you should buy a Honda Civic. I'm just saying this is an example. So think back to when you had a new car. And I remember when I had a Honda Civic. I'm driving around. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a new Honda Civic over there. Oh my gosh, there's another Honda Civic over there. Oh my gosh, look, there's another Honda Civic over there. Have I all of a sudden joined the Honda Civic Club? Have you all had that happen? Probably. You get in your car and all of a sudden you start to notice all the other cars that are like yours. Now that's frequency bias. It doesn't mean everybody went out and bought a new car. What it does mean is that you programmed your brain without you even knowing it to pay attention to something that's important to you. Because one of the things we know as adults is this: we are teleological, meaning that we are goal oriented. And our brains can work very subconsciously much faster than they can consciously for us. That's why you can find new cars quickly when you've just bought. When you're like, oh, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. That's why if you've ever had to, write a paper for college or university, as soon as you get your topic, you start to notice people talking about it everywhere. And you might even notice after our session today that people are starting to talk about frequency bias or your reticular activating system. You start to notice things differently because we're talking about it. So I'm going to give you a simple tip that you can immediately use to help your brain problem solve quicker. When you get stuck implementing things, so I know when I was on a big IT initiative many years ago, I was rolling out a very complex IT project. It was telemedicine, which is using two-way video conferencing and medical devices. I was rolling it out around this province where I live in Canada. And it was really complex and really difficult. And I remember sitting at my desk, and maybe some of you have done this, where you're like, I don't know what to do. Can't figure this out. Well, just like when you buy your new car, if you keep saying, I don't know what to do, your brain is going to create new brain patterns and ideas that you can't figure it out. So, a very simple tip for you to do, and I want you to try this out because it will create new brain waves and new brain patterns so quickly that your head will spin in a good way. When you get stuck, when you're working by yourself or with a group of people, what I want you to do is future focus your language. So when people say, I can't figure this out, we don't know what to do, what I want you to say is I want you to future focus your language and say, we are going to figure this out. We are going to figure this out. This is not positive thinking. I hate positive thinking, which is putting a positive spin on a bad situation. I'm not saying that I have the answer. I have the answer. That would be positive thinking, which isn't true in this case. You don't have the answer. However, you are going to figure it out. And as soon as you catch yourself saying, I don't know what to do, reframe it and say, I'm going to figure this out. I guarantee you within 4 minutes, I can guarantee it. You'll start to get new ideas come in faster than you can consciously bring them. And you'll figure out what ways to figure it out. It's very simple. It's very simple and it will work very quickly for you, but you have to catch your thinking when you get like that. So all you're going to do is future focus. We're going to figure this out. Because when you talk about what you don't have or when you talk about how things aren't, you get more of that. So you want to look at, how am I going to figure this out? So future focus your language. Do it for an individual and do it for the people you work with. It will help you be solution focused. Second piece is to use selection bias to your advantage. So if I had all of you draw the home screen to your mobile phone with all the apps where they are supposed to be, let's see if I can pull up all my apps here. So you can see there's a whole bunch of 16 different apps there. If I asked you, hey, I want you to draw the screen of your mobile phone, put all the 16 apps exactly where they are, I guarantee you couldn't do it. Why do you think that is? Well, because when we look at our phones, we're not looking at where the apps are, we're looking at other data that's there. However, if I did say to you for the next hour, every time you look at your phone, I want you to notice where the apps are, you could actually draw that. So the principle here is that there's often answers in front of us that we don't see. And sometimes we have to expand our thinking and be able to look for those answers that might already be in front of us. You can try this with teams that you work with. You can try this with family members. You can try it with colleagues. No one can draw the face of their mobile phone perfectly with all the apps. In the old days, because I'm a little old, I'd have people draw the faces of their watch. No one can draw the face of their watch perfectly either. If you don't believe me, try it. People will put numbers where there are no numbers, date stamps where there are. They'll put the brand up here when the brand's down there. The answers are often in front of us. Sometimes we don't see them. So we need to shift our mindset. And the other piece about mindset is this. I know as an former IT person, I haven't worked in IT for many years, but back when I used to lead a lot of IT projects, one of the pieces I could tell you was, whenever I tried to help people engage in the future of what I wanted to have happen, I'd turn into a salesperson. I'd have to try to convince them of what all the benefits were. And I'd be like, if you just do this, this will work better, this will be faster, this will do better, and this will work faster. And I turn into this person that would try to convince people to do anything. So what I'm going to suggest to you as part of a mindset shift is, you're not a salesperson. And even good salespeople take off that salesperson hat and know, just trying to convince someone to do something doesn't work. You don't need to convince anybody of anything. Why? Because you can't make people do anything. Everyone has a choice. There's consequences from their choice. However, everyone does have a choice. So don't feel like you have to convince people to get on board your train. You don't. I want you to take that convincing sales hat off and put on an educator hat. Your job is to give people the benefits and the impacts and the reasons, and try to educate them. So take off that convincing salesperson hat, even if you are a salesperson, and put on the educator hat. Because think of yourself as an educator. Your job's to create an environment for people to engage in your ideas. Your job's to create an environment for people to buy into what you want to have happen. Your job's to create an environment for people to say yes to what you want to have happen. You can't convince people of anything. So take that pressure off yourself. Now, last tip about mindset is, we can prepare ourselves to be unprepared. And if any of you have ever done pilot projects, and Lord knows I used to do a lot of pilots. And when I would do a pilot, I'd have to prepare the people that I'm working with to, like, we have to be prepared. There's going to be some things that happen that we're not going to be prepared for. So how are we going to roll with this? And one of the tips I like to suggest for people is to use perspective to your advantage. Remind people of how far they've come. Remind people that if they've worked through the pandemic, they can handle this. Because even though we may know what's going to happen, we have to be prepared to be unprepared. And every single one of you, and most people on the planet, have been able to do that. We've been able to live with the uncertainty and roll with the punches. So prepare yourself to be unprepared as we go forward. And that will help you navigate the future work, because then you won't hold on so tightly to the way things have to be. Yes, there's security issues. Yes, things need to go out a certain way. And sometimes we need to be prepared that things aren't going to go the way they are. And we have to remind people of that. And that can be hard when those of us in IT want things to be perfect. And if it's one thing I've learned throughout the pandemic, is that nothing's ever perfect and that we have to roll with the punches. And when we shift our mindset, what we know is this: high performing people see more. They see more options. They see more ways of doing things. They use frequency and selection bias to their advantage. They future focus their language. They leverage that alchemy of language because high performing people see more. Why? Because they think differently. And that's all it is. It's little simple tricks like this that you can use to shift your thinking quickly to adapt to change even more powerfully. So let's move on to step number two. We're going to talk about cognitive flexibility and that ability to expand our thinking. Because guess what happens is this: we get stuck in thinking about the way things have to be. So, first thing I'm going to suggest that you do is I want you all to remove the word but from your vocabulary. Just remove it from your vocabulary and replace it with and. So, for example, when I had team members come to me and say, if I was like, I really need to make this change to this piece of software here so that it integrates well with the interface over here, so the dashboard looks like this here. If someone said to me, Greg, I can do that, but this is what the impact is, I would sit there going, well, yes, but means no. So what I suggest for you to do is replace but with and. So you're like, yes, I can do that. And this is what the impact is. Because then we weigh the pros and cons evenly. And your goal as IT professionals is to keep people engaged in your ideas, to move them down that path quickly. Because why? Because you don't have time to waste. So remove the word but from your vocabulary completely. A way to remember this is if you've ever had performance appraisals done on you, and I know I have, I I really hate when people do this. They're like, Greg, you're really good at this, but you need to improve on this. Where it weights things differently. So you're really good at this, and you need to improve on this. This isn't semantics and this isn't positive thinking. It's about keeping people engaged in your ideas. Because why? Change is speeding up. We don't have time to waste. When we use the word but, it stops people from engaging. So remove the word but from your vocabulary. It's a super easy way to keep people engaged and to expand your thinking. So when we say yes, but, it usually means no, and it shut down ideas around what we want to have happen. Now, the other thing I know is probably a lot of you sit in meetings. Probably a lot of you sit in a lot of meetings. If we were in a live room together, I'd probably see hands up everywhere about people sitting in meetings and lots of meetings. Now, this may happen to you in meetings. I know it's happened to me, whereas I have what I call the ping pong ball effect starts going around, where someone brings something up and Gary says, this is what I think is a really good idea here. And I'm like, Gary, that's never going to work. I've been here 11 years. And Nona's like, well, what about this idea here? And Gary's like, well, I think this idea is really good here. And Rob's like, but my idea is this idea. And I'm like, that's never going to work. And someone else is like, but Nona's idea is really good. And everybody keeps bringing up ideas and shutting them down. And then you have to have another meeting. At the end of that meeting, to have a discussion about what happened at the last meeting, because you have no idea what happened because there's been no outcomes of the meeting because people just had ideas being thrown up and shut down. That's exhausting just talking about it. I just hate meetings where that's happening, where we're trying to problem solve an issue and all we're having ideas is that's not going to work here, that'll maybe work here, that won't work, this won't work. That's not productive. So what I suggest to you as you go forward is no one brings ideas to meetings that are fully formed. No one. Doesn't matter if the CAO, doesn't matter if the CIO, doesn't matter if it's the head of IT, doesn't matter who it is. Gary might bring 10%. Gary might bring an idea to a meeting that's 10% good. My idea might be 10% good. Nona's idea might be 10% good. Rob's idea might be 10% good. When you allow the ideas to collide, 10% of that idea might be good with this 10% of idea. That's where innovation happens. Ideas need to collide for innovation to occur because no one brings ideas to meetings that are fully formed. So here's what practical tip that you can do the next time you're either in a meeting or leading a meeting where you're trying to problem solve an issue. Be very clear in your meeting when you're going to do idea generation, how we're going to solve our problems. What are your ideas? And this isn't just brainstorming. This is just about getting your ideas out. spending 2 minutes on getting our ideas out to allow the ideas to collide. And no one's allowed to say, yes, but that won't work. No one's allowed to say it for the 2 minutes. Then, after the 2 minutes, when you've done your creative thinking, you do critical thinking, which is decision making. And critical thinking does not mean being critical. Critical thinking means out of the 2 minutes of idea generation, which ideas are we actually going to take some action on? So be very, very clear in your meetings, in your one on one conversations, when you're going to generate ideas and when you're going to make decisions. And it might take you shutting down people like me, because I'm that person who'll be in the meeting saying, that's not going to work. I've been here 11 years. And you'll be like, oh, thanks for that. So if I'm that person in your meeting, you need to be able to turn to me or have someone say, hey, hold that thought for 2 minutes. We're just going to get the ideas out. Then we're going to make a decision around what ideas to take action on. Because we get stuck in black and white thinking and what I call binary thinking. And we want to get into integrative thinking, which is playing in the gray area. And just like we said with the mindset, think about times in your work where, the ideas might have been in front of you. People brought ideas in, you can't see them, and you're stuck in this, like, it's either this way or this way. I know it's either this way or this way. It has to be either this way or this way. And yet when we get unstuck from that, what happens is we can sometimes play in that gray area where those ideas do get to collide, where innovation does get to happen. And I know in my world, you know, just like I said at the beginning, that, if I'd said to you, how long is it going to take to make everyone virtual in your workplace? Probably most CEOs, executives, it's going to take a couple of years, a year to plan, a year to implement. And yet the reality is most people broke through those limitations and played in the gray area, and it happened like this. So we are way more change ready than we think, and we're way more able to adapt than we sometimes think that we're able to. Because one of the pieces that I know is that when we're dealing with change and trying to get people engaged in our ideas and trying for us to help, navigate the future, is we always have to remember that the change happens in the mind of the other person. It's all about them. It's not about you. Yes, you have your mandate. Yes, you have your pieces that you need to get across. Yet the change always happens in the mind of the other person. The buy-in happens in the mind of the other person. The sale happens in the mind of the other person. The agreement happens in the mind of the other person. So when we're wanting to engage others in our ideas and help them navigate the future, either at the team or organizational level, we have to ask, what do they need to be? What do they need to know? What do they need to have so they can say yes to this, or so they can agree to this, or so they can engage in it? The term we talk about is, end user experience. Well, we have to engage the end users in this to figure out what's going to work for them. And sometimes as IT professionals, we have to translate the language that we use so that other people can understand it. Because there was an IT guy I used to work with, and he would always say to people that I worked with, and you may have done this too, where they'll be like, I don't know how to do this. And that wonderfully smart IT person comes over and starts to explain. And eventually they just summarize and they say, the problem with this is between the desk or the chair and the keyboard. The problem's between the chair and the keyboard. And it would always take people to be, oh, you mean me? Where it's really about how do we translate what we're trying to do and get other people to pay attention to it so that people know what we're actually doing. So remember, ideas need to collide for innovation to occur. And remember that the change happens in the mind of the other person. So we want to get people engaged. I don't care if you're a salesperson, the CIO, or the frontline IT solution, or the person, or the engineer, whatever you are doing. Remember that we want to navigate the future. Get into the head of the person, get into the group of the people that you want to. What do they need to be? What do they need to know? What they do need to have so that they can take action on our ideas. So we're going to do another poll because I want to hear from you. So these are at the left-hand side of your screen that they'll come up. And if you're in full screen, you might need to get out of full screen if you want to see the results. So out of the two below, who is happier on the podium? We know the gold. We know the person who won the gold is going to be the happiest. Woo, woo, I won gold. So out of the silver medalist, which is over here, or the bronze medalist, I want you to answer in the poll, who do you think is happier? Is it the bronze medalist or the silver medalist? Then we'll talk about why that is and what that looks like. And I'll give you a tip to help you with your work. So who do you think is happier? The bronze medalist or the silver medalist? I'm going to give you a minute to answer that. So we got 100% of people saying bronze medalist right now, because you might have figured out it might be a bit of a trick question, but I'll give you another few moments to answer that. So let's see, what else do we got? Oh, I'm still seeing bronze medalist, bronze medalist. Let's see if there's any others. No one's saying silver. I'm surprised. So you sort of knew this was a bit of a trick question, right? Well, you're actually right. It is the bronze medalist. Now, I guess the question would be, why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? And if we were live, I would get some responses from you, but I want you to think about, oh, someone said the silver medalist here. Look, we're getting a few more responses here. Someone said a silver medalist. So why do you think that could be the case? So one of the things that we know when we're trying to expand people's thinkings is that we often try to compare ourselves to our plan, to what's going to happen. And yes, we want to measure to a plan, but we always want to measure backwards to a plan, not to some ideal future. Because if you try to measure yourself to something that hasn't happened yet, we tend to get discouraged. So, like many of you said, the bronze medalist is actually happier. I'm going to tell you why. Because they measured backwards. They were like, well, what if I didn't win? I'm lucky to be on the podium. Whereas the silver medalist is measuring forward and saying, I wish I'd gotten gold. So they aren't as happy. Now, this research comes from about 30 years ago. There was some studies done out of Cornell on counterfactual thinking. It was done at not in the 2018 Olympics, but the 1992 Olympics and 1994 Empire State Games. And the premise is that when we measure forwards to something that hasn't happened, we can get really discouraged. And that in order for us to be successful in our work, because people often say to me, how do I become more successful in my work? How do I become more successful? I need to be more confident. I need to be more confident. Well, what I can tell you is this, is that past successes are what build confidence to help you create the future. It's called counterfactual thinking. So past successes build your confidence to create the future. So how can you use this as IT professionals when you're trying to, deal with more digitized I can't even speak, rapid digitized workspaces? How are we supposed to deal with that when there's, everybody's moving things to the cloud? There's electronic documentation going on. I mean, when I worked in healthcare years ago in IT, we were just starting electronic documentation. That was 20 years ago. And there's still people just beginning that process now. So what we need to do is remind the people that we're working with, and this is every single one of your jobs. I want you to remind the people that you're working with what they've done well in the past and how they can apply that to the future, because this is the key. If people can learn how to use new versions of Microsoft Teams, and people can learn new versions of this and that and every other piece of technology out there, they can do what you're asking them to do. Our job is to remind people of what they've done in the past when it comes to how they've navigated that work and how they can do it in the future. I remember I was teaching a group of nurses about 20 years ago. And we were starting this whole electronic documentation project, and I had to teach them some pieces about project management. And I had to remind them that, they use assessment, planning, intervention, and evaluation on patients. And guess what? That's basically the project management process. Assessment, planning, intervention, evaluation. We use different language: initiating, planning, executing, controlling, monitoring, and closing. Similar processes. And I would remind them, if you can do this with patients, you can do this with electronic documentation. The skills are transferable. And what we know with the future of work is everybody's looking at what are the transferable skills. So, as an IT person, remind your folks about what they've done. So let's move into step three. So we've talked about shifting our mindset as being a really key way for stepping into change quickly. Second piece we talked about is expanding our thinking and that cognitive flexibility. The third piece we're going to talk about is how do we actually help people take action? How do we get people to take risks and take action? So let's do our third poll here. So again, if you're in full screen, get out of full screen and let's do this poll here. So this is, what are the biggest risks you encounter? So I want to know from you when getting people to take action on your ideas. What are the biggest risks that you encounter? People don't understand. We're seeing some of that. What else? What are some other risks that you encounter? Oh, people are too busy. That's one I get a lot. People are just really too busy. This is just another thing they have to do. It's like when people download a new version of software and they move the buttons around where to save things, or they move new file directories and you can't find things. People get frustrated because they're too busy and they don't have that extra 10 minutes to try to figure things out. Oh, too much negativity. Oh, yeah, I encounter a lot of that. And I can be one of those negative people. I got to tell you, I can be one of those negative people. Or we're starting to see people are too busy, starting to see that. So, yeah, we get worried about how things are going to be. And one of the things I can tell you about this is, we get stuck in the negativity, or people don't understand, or people are too busy. And, people are worried about all of this stuff. And one of the pieces is this, is that worries are just made up negative stories. They're not facts. Again, they're looking to the future for something that we're worried about. So one of the things I always like to do with worries is ground them in facts. And I like to ground them in risks. So risks, for those of you that haven't done any risk management, some of you might have done risk management. There's a few questions I like to use to help us ground our worries in facts. And I want to ask people, what are you worried about? What do you don't understand? What are you negative about? And the busyness, sometimes people just gotta do it. So when I'm getting what people don't understand, I usually want to ask, and I'll use these questions here. You'll be like, I'm worried about this is happening, worried about this is happening. I'll say, what's the likelihood of this happening? Low, medium, or high? If it does happen, what's the impact? Low, medium, or high? Because we can't manage things that have a super low probability of happening or super low impact. We want to spend our time managing the issues that have higher probability, higher impact. Now, a lot of people will jump, and I remember my IT team would come to me and say, here's my contingency plan. Here's my contingency plan. And my first words back to them is this: I don't care what your contingency plan is yet. I want to know what you're going to do to prevent this from happening. Because contingency plans are great, yet I want every single one of you on here to be strategic. It's hard when we've been reactive the last number of years. We've all been running on a treadmill to keep up with COVID and what's been going on. We've been very reactive, and now we're being asked to be more strategic. We're asked to plan. We're asked to think forward. So I want to know, if you think something's going to happen that has a higher probability of happening and higher impact, what are you going to do to prevent it from happening? And then if it does happen, I want to know what your contingency plan is. But I don't expect you just to be sitting back going, hey, I'm just going to wait for this to fail. I'm just going to wait for this to fail. What are you going to do to prevent it from failing? And how can we rigorously manage the expectations around this? Because every pilot I've been on, I always predict, the first round of testing is probably not going to go the way I expect. So I want to sort of layer it down. I want to put some prevention strategies in place, and I want to have a bit of a contingency plan as a backup so I don't end off track and off my calendar. So remember, worries are made up negative stories. Ground them in facts. I'm not saying don't listen to worries. Yes, listen to worries. And ground them in facts if you want to problem solve it. Last but not least, I would suggest that every single one of you, if you want to navigate the future and get people engaged in your ideas and get yourself sometimes engaged, because sometimes we get stuck. Like I said earlier, we want to future focus our language, and I want you to become doubt removers. So, what is a doubt remover? That's someone that finds evidence or proof. I want you to be like a detective. When people say we can't do something or this isn't going to work here, I want you to be like a detective and find evidence or proof of something somewhere similar that has happened. Because when you find something similar somewhere, it doesn't need to be exactly the same. It can be something similar. Because when you find evidence or proof, it removes doubt. And when you remove doubt, you give people courage to step into the change. And that's your job. Our job is to get people engaged in our changes as quickly and rapidly as possible. So finding evidence or proof is a great strategy to do it. If someone can do it over there, maybe we can do it here. If someone's done it here, maybe someone can do it there. And I'm sure VSI Login has, case studies, examples, white papers, examples of proof of where similar things have happened. So use this to your advantage as you go forward. Draw on the expertise that's available for you to help implement the solutions that you need to implement. Now, as we move to wrap up, I want to summarize what we've been doing just to give you some key points, remind you of them to take forward. So, step one, remember, shift your mindset, ramp up that brain engagement to problem solve faster. It's catch yourself thinking, I can't do this, I can't figure this out. Future focus that language, just like that sitting in your new car, noticing new cars faster than conscious thought. You will ramp up your brain engagement to problem solve faster when you future focus your language. Prepare people to be unprepared by using perspective to your advantage. Remove the word but from your vocabulary when you're expanding your thinking. Leverage the alchemy and power of language. It is there for you. Language will trigger your brain to problem solve quickly. And of course, allow ideas to collide for innovation to occur. No one brings fully formed ideas to meetings. No one. No one brings up ideas they think are silly. Everyone thinks their ideas are good. So allow ideas to collide for innovation to occur. Last but not least, if you want people to take action on your ideas, which ultimately we do, we all get worried. Remember, worries are made up negative stories. Take calculated risks. Be a solution focused thinker and find evidence or proof. When we find evidence or proof, it removes doubt. And when you remove doubt, it gives people courage to step into the change. And that's what we want to do. Because remember, we can't make people do anything. We can create the environment. We can give them the information. We can take off that hat that we have on them. I got to convince people to get on board my train. You don't need to convince people of anything. Even salespeople don't need to convince people of anything. Salespeople that go in convincing don't get the sale. Go in with an education hat. Go in with the hat of creating a dialogue with people. As you do that, you'll find it will elevate your effectiveness regardless of what your role is. And I've seen it 100 times. And if you incorporate one of these simple practices we've talked about today, it will elevate your effectiveness. I've had people come back to me years later saying, I just took the word but out of my vocabulary and I elevated my effectiveness. I just allowed ideas to collide for 2 whole minutes. Then we did critical thinking. Or I future focus my language and said, when I can't figure it out, I say, I'm going to figure this out. And then bam, I get the ideas and I ground my worries in facts. So find something meaningful that stood out from you from our time together today and from the other sessions you attended at the virtual event today. Because, one of the things I know is this: the budgets, the frameworks, the plans, all of that's really important. Yet it's your day to day interactions with others. And it's the magic of daily changes that are going to make the biggest difference in your career. Because guess what? People remember you in those moments that matter. It's those day to day interactions. And one of the things I can tell you is this: How do I know that you can do this and engage and apply these principles? Because every single one of you is way more change ready than you think. So try these out and practice them. As a reminder, there are some resources for you to the side of your screen. So go into the attachments, make sure there's a infographic there on the future of change. It has some info on data analytics, artificial intelligence, some of those pieces. And there's also an 8-step guide to help you shape the future of work. Again, goes into way more detail than what we've talked about today. By all means, reach out to me if you have questions about any of this content. My website's there. It has tons of resources on it forward. So go forth, be great, have a great rest of your day, and thank you everybody for being here at this virtual event today. And I'm sure as IT professionals, you will just be able to go forth and change the world. Thank you all.